fraud of the Federal Reserve is much, much bigger than we thought. So, the central bank of the US is really leading us astray here. And the most important thing right now for the US is the audit of the Federal Reserve. Because in a new interview with Caitlin Long, it comes to light that even secret assets are being covered up here, right on the Federal Reserve balance sheet. This is about real estate investments. This is about other valuable assets that are just being obscured from us here. There is no transparent communication with people here. In addition, Cynthia Lummis goes one step further and compares the Federal Reserve to a casino that makes its decisions based on coin tosses and much worse and has no plan at all. When it comes to financial policy and all that, everything is happening super randomly, but they act like they're the big babos, saying that they have everything under control and so on. And now we have the excuses of Elon Musk, Donald Trump, Department of Government Efficiency. They want to audit the Federal Reserve. And accordingly, there are more and more people speaking up like Cynthia Lummis and Caitlin Long. And here they are firing back again, bringing to light things that have been kept quiet for many, many years. Caitlin Long even talks about an FTX 2.0 moment. You really have to check this out. An absolute collapse could be coming our way. But this also has to do with Bitcoin because we're talking about Wall Street firms that are over-leveraged. But first, let's see what Cynthia Lummis has to say. Cynthia Lummis posted a picture from South Park where you can see a chicken getting its head chopped off. And then, in the background, you have the South Park characters, which are supposed to represent the FOMC of the Federal Reserve, the central bank. And now they're chopping off the chicken's head. Randomly, decisions are made here, like raising or lowering interest rates and so on, just to show that they really have no clue what they're doing. Because the country's chicken, after its head is chopped off, just randomly ends up in some field. And here it is comparable to a coin toss. And so it seems like the folks at the Federal Reserve are making their decisions this way. Of course, that's an exaggeration, but it's meant to symbolically show that they're just making random decisions and don't have any real plan when it comes to central banking or monetary policy, because nobody can really have that. It is hubris on the part of the central bank to think that it can have a mega currency area decide, but actually they have no idea about anything. And here Cynthia Lummis writes about it. The more I uncover, the more I learn. The more I'm convinced that the Federal Reserve has no clue and doesn't have a plan for how decisions are made. And more people are feeling this way, and that's why more and more people are demanding, hey, we need to audit, just like Paul Rand says. My Ron Paul, of course, the father of Rand Paul. But they're both in favor of shutting down the Fed, closing it down, and revealing the whole thing. And now we actually have Caitlin Long, who was in an interview. Caitlin Long is also the one who uncovered all the stories behind Operation Chalkpoint 2.0, showing how there's been a systematic crackdown on Bitcoin and crypto firms in the U.S. And people here are having their accounts closed en masse like a debanking has taken place, like we've almost never seen in U.S. history. And now she's talking about how massive upheavals are coming our way. The Federal Reserve has a shadow budget. They're hiding assets from us. They have a whole lot of sneaky schemes. But just listen for yourselves.
I am really interested to see what's going to happen when Doge goes into the Fed, because look at the Fed's balance sheet. I don't know off the top of my head how big the other assets line item is, but last I looked, it was several $100 billion. What's in that? It's an interesting question. And I would guess that when Doge gets around to the Fed and they go looking, that there's going to be some interesting stuff in there. I don't know what it is. It's a big number. Don't quote me on the exact number, but just know that it's a big number, and it could be hiding a lot of real estate. It could be, hiding a lot of assets that are vanilla, and the Fed's balance sheet is so big that it's not material enough to break those out. But it could also be hiding some interesting things that the Fed doesn't want to disclose. And this whole audit the Fed movement has been going after for a long time. And Doge has certainly uncovered some interesting things. The limestone cave.
So she makes it very clear to you. It's interesting when the Department of Government Efficiency audits the Federal Reserve. She is very clear that the balance sheet here is different from what we're being told. So we have here, for example, some kind of public balance sheet. And there are a few million, a few trillion on it. That's billions. So you always have to translate it correctly here. But there are also assets that might not be publicly declared here. She's talking about real estate. She's talking about other assets. And that's going to be very, very interesting. She also says that definitely revelations are very, very likely to come to light. And that's why they don't want to audit the Federal Reserve. That's why there haven't been any audits yet. And it's just like at Fort Knox. I mean, it would be so easy to audit the whole thing here. The Federal Reserve, that would probably be something that could be done in about a week or so. Then it would be audited, maybe even in a day or two. I don't know how long that takes. If you have a bit of a backlog to catch up on, then it might take a little longer. But it would be really, really easy to audit that. But it hasn't been done for years. And why isn't it being done? Exactly. Because Caitlin Long is also talking about how things are going to come to light that you wouldn't expect. And then it's going to trigger a shockwave. Then it might also further erode trust in the institution. And that could really lead to, as Ron Paul says, the audit, automatically meaning the end of the Fed. Because Ron Paul is also very clear about this. He said it in an interview that I covered. If the Fed gets audited, then the Fed will be shut down. Because there are so many things kept secret that will then be revealed. And that will automatically lead to the closure. Because this is just an unbearable thing. It's an unbearable institution. And it's going to come out that there was massive corruption would be at play. There are even people who speculate that somehow the Federal Reserve stole the gold from Fort Knox, and that it's somehow being kept in secret balance sheets of the Federal Reserve or something like that. But that's just speculation. That's not official proof or anything. That's not an official statement. I also quickly played the film where someone actually claimed back in 1980 that the Federal Reserve somehow pocketed the gold from Fort Knox. And then it's sold off behind the scenes, where I don't know how exactly they did it. And that's why this could trigger the biggest financial earthquake in history. And if it comes out that this whole thing is a scam, and we all know it's a scam, I know that the Federal Reserve knows that, the politicians know that, Caitlin Long probably knows that. Every viewer knows that the Federal Reserve is a scam, but we just can't prove it. It's also like quantum physics, like Schrodinger's Federal Reserve scam or something like that. We all know about the scam, but we really can't prove it because the scam is there, but as soon as we want to look and audit, the scam is no longer there. If we're not really allowed to look because we're forbidden to do so, if we're not allowed to go in there. And because it's not a public organization, but a private bank, this private bank can somehow have just a handful of people making decisions about the wealth of billions of people. The US dollar is used by billions of people, or at least maybe a billion people, or something like that worldwide. And the Fed just has the scepter over the US dollar. But now it gets even more exciting. Caitlin Long makes another statement here. And now she's addressing the FTX 2.0 moment. And Caitlin Long was also the one, as she mentions here in the interview, who back then provided insider information to the US authorities, saying, hey, FTX is going to collapse. The whole thing is really, really scammy. Caitlin Long has already uncovered several scams. She uncovered Operation Shockpoint 2.0, she uncovered FTX, and now she's turning her attention to Wall Street, and she says, folks, pay very close attention. The next FTX scandal isn't going to happen on the stock exchange or anything like that. It's going to be Wall Street that massively overleverages and overestimates itself, but just soak it all in. She would simply say here in the interview, hey, Caitlin, what's up? What's the next FTX moment that's coming our way? And now pay close attention to what answer she gives here. Oh, and maybe also for those who don't know what FTX is, that was the big collapse in the last bull market, which then caused the parabolic peak to not happen, where Bitcoin really dove into the bear market. What came out of this is that the exchange, FTX, didn't have any Bitcoin at all, and they issued massive amounts of paper, Bitcoin, and that made the whole market explode. And now she says,
I actually think that it's the Wall Street firms this time. There are a couple of big lending facilities that are, it's the same issue all over again. They're going to get themselves fractional. They're going to commingle collateral with their own funds and their other customers' funds. So they're not going to properly segregate. And they're effectively going to do what Sam did, which is use customers' funds to keep themselves in business. And you don't know that the company's insolvent until they have a liquidity event and then they hit the wall really fast. I think it's going to be Wall Street firms this time. It's going to be hedge fund type firms, kind of asset managers that get involved in the lending business and don't stick to a one-for-one backing. And it's just in the DNA of Wall Street to use leverage on everything. It's just not in their DNA to stick to one-to-one backing.
So this is really crazy what she's revealing here. And she's essentially expressing her thoughts here. Hey, in this context, the next individuals or entities who will be significantly and massively responsible for causing significant disruptions in the near future within the Bitcoin and cryptocurrency space, as we know it, are the major Wall Street financial firms and institutions, or Wall Street in general. Yeah, how do you say it? Just Wall Street, because it's known for utilizing extensive and massive leverage. And that's what happened with FTX, that they used customer funds to basically save their own skin, that they over-leveraged. They issued paper Bitcoin that weren't even one-to-one back, and that they're mixing it all up here. And that says that this will also happen at Wall Street, that they will mix customer funds with the speculations they are making behind the scenes. So you take, for example, the customer funds, leverage it all, grab some risky papers or something like that, and then try to pull in some returns. Then it might work for a while. This also worked with FTX, but as soon as the customers wanted to access their funds at FTX, it was the case that Sam Bankman-Fried had invested the money somewhere. But the problem was he couldn't get to the money because it was tied up in long-term investments. He basically didn't have the liquidity. People wanted to access their money, but then there wasn't any Bitcoin because it wasn't backed one-to-one. There was no backing because the customer funds were loaned out or used somewhere else. And exactly the same problem, she says, is going to hit Wall Street now. And that's a really, really interesting take because that would also mean that perhaps some ETFs would start gambling with customers' money, or that maybe some other asset managers or very reputable institutions start playing around with the money. The problem is, normally it works relatively well if you don't have such volatile assets. But if you have assets like Bitcoin and then go into the bear market, and then there's somehow a 50 or 60% correction, and you need to access the assets, but you've somehow speculated, gambled, or even bet against your own customers or something like that, and if they can't get to the funds, then the whole Ponzi scheme just collapses. And that's always the problem, that these Wall Street firms are often considered too big to fail. That means they're so big that they can take on the risk because they know exactly that if something blows up here, if there's a boom, then the government will step in. And then Uncle Sam comes in and says, all right, we're putting together a bailout package. And that's also the case with hedge funds and other big banks. And so on, it's always been the case in the past. The little guy, if he gambles away his money, he has to pay the price. But the big guy, he can just hope for a bailout package because he can say, hey, we're too big. We're essential to the state. And that's what's happening here. Caitlin Long says that the next people in line to get massively liquidated are here, and maybe trigger the next bear market, that it's the Wall Street firms. But hey, feel free to drop your comments on that too. As you can see, it's clear that Wall Street firms with their leverage are, let's say, very, very dangerous for the Bitcoin market. Or I think someone once said something like that. The three dangerous things for all men are leverage, liquor, and ladies. Leverage is exactly what concerns Wall Street. And those are definitely things that can really get you into hot water. You really have to be super careful here. So on one hand, we have a bearish analysis from Caitlin Long where she points out the dangers. On the other hand, there's the bullish perspective here, that all the scams are coming from the Federal Reserve. Overall, she's definitely ultra bullish on Bitcoin because even if Wall Street blows something up or if something were to go up in flames, it's just a short-term setback. We already have so many crashes and disasters. And you know what? I've seen it in the Bitcoin space, and Bitcoin has always survived. Those were just short-term setbacks. But as I said, leave it to me below. Let me know in the comments what you think about the massive theses. And if you want to buy some Bitcoin, I'll drop a link down below for you. 21 Bitcoin, where you can easily, safely, and simply buy Bitcoin. You can still get up to 20% off the fees when buying Bitcoin with the code. See you later. Peace out.